Yo, what's good people? We have a new Electro 4-star coming to Genshin in 5.2 and he gives a few characters an Ororon for their money. Get it? Let's look at his kit builds and teams. So what does he do and how do we play him? He's actually one of the simplest kits we've had in a while. You press his skill and an electro ball will jump between opponents dealing electro damage. It can hit each opponent once and can jump between 3 opponents, so a total of 3 instances of damage. His burst deals AoE electro damage when you cast it, and it lays down an electro ball that taunts enemies and gives off sound waves. These sound waves spin around dealing electro damage. Ororon's passive gives him Night Soul points when teammates trigger Night Soul burst or when a Hydro or Electro teammate attacks an opponent. When an opponent takes Electro charge damage or Night Soul align damage from a teammate, Ororon consumes 10 Night Soul points to enter the Night Soul blessing state and deals Electro damage to a total of 4 enemies. That can occur once every 1.8 seconds. To summarize, he has 3 ways of dealing Electro damage. His skill deals an instance of damage 1 time to 3 enemies, his burst deals damage on cast and continuously in an AoE through its duration, and his passive deals damage to 4 enemies when the enemy takes either Electro charged or Night Soul aligned damage. He also has a passive that gives him a sigil after he uses his skill. It gives the on-fielder free energy every time you hit an opponent with a normal charged or plunge attack. If Ororon's off-field, he also gets free energy. This can be triggered 3 times per duration. 9 energy for him and the on-fielder, not bad, not bad. For pros and cons, he functions well at C0. All you need is 1 copy and you get a lot of his value off rip. Part of this base value is that he's the first Natlan holder of 4-piece scroll that applies something other than Geo. The downside to a unit like Kachina is that we're limited for Geo options, whereas Electro and all the elements it reacts with have way more. Ororon's also versatile in that you can play him in a bunch of different teams and get value out of him. He also brings less meta units back into the mix. We'll expand on all that in the team section of the video, but it's worth a mention for now. All Natlan units have a traversal mechanic. Ororon's is that he can jump high, which is quite convenient as you might know from playing units like Kazuha and Kanich. A downside is the short duration and range on his burst. Considering he has AoE potential with his passive, it's a shame he doesn't have a wider range with his burst. Also, taunts never seem to work, so I don't expect anything different from his. Going through his constellations quicker than his granny goes through drinks at the pub, his C1 lets his skill bounce 2 more times and makes opponents take 50% increased damage from his passive. His C2 gives him electro damage after using his burst. His C3 and C5 increases burst and skill levels by 3. His C4 makes his burst spin faster for more instances of damage and it refunds some of his energy on cast. His C6 gives 10% attack to the on-fielder after triggering Ororon's passive and it stacks up to 3 times. It also deals a buffed version of the damage from his passive 1 time when you cast his burst. In terms of weapons, Elegy lets him give the team 100 elemental mastery and 20% attack, and it also means you don't need to build any energy recharge in his artifacts. As of right now, this is his best support weapon. For damage, you can run anything with crit or attack. Aqua Simulacra gives him 88% crit damage and increases all aspects of his damage, skill burst and passive by 20%. Skyward Harp has a high base attack with a little bit of both crit stats. Polar Star gives him 33% crit rate as well as 12% skill and burst damage plus a bunch of attack with the amount depending on the conditions met. For 4 stars, Viridescent Hunt is a nice throwback. I used to run this on Child all the time and it was fun because it's the only weapon in the game with built-in crowd control. Running this on Ororon means you don't need to run a crowd control unit and you can keep enemies within the range of his burst this way. You do have to spam normals until it activates though, which is clunky. 27% crit rate to go with it's always appreciated though. Alley Hunter has a high base attack, also has attack as the secondary stat, and it increases his damage the longer he's off field, which will be most of the time. The Natlan Craftable Chainbreaker is a decent free to play option with the same stats as Alley Hunter, but the passive gives attack and elemental mastery instead of damage. The Fontaine Craftable has an attack secondary stat and gives a 32% damage bonus when he's healed. Stringless gives 48% elemental burst and skill damage, which is solid, plus the elemental mastery will help if you want to run in with Dendro, although that's not his best use right now. Range Gauge is worth a mention too with a high base attack. The secondary stats attack as well, and the passive also gives attack and elemental damage when he's healed, but that can be a little clunky. Favonius Warbow is the only 4-star with support potential and it gives him a lot of energy recharge, but it might be overkill if you already have a lot in your artifacts. Talking of his artifacts, they're easy, just use the Natlan support set scroll. If you already have a scroll holder, you know, maybe you're from a future where we have a playable 6-star Paimon, you can give him 4-piece Noblesse to support the team. If you want to give him a damage build, you can give him 4-piece Marechaux Saiyan for arena teams, or 2-piece Thunder and Fury 2-piece attack without Farina. It's not likely we'll get a scenario where you don't want him holding 4-piece scroll though, so I wouldn't try cooking with his build. He'll want attack sands, electro goblets, and crit circlet. Okay, so we know what he does and how to build him. Now who do you run him with? You could use Clarande on field, and with her not needing a healer because she can heal herself, you can dedicate the other 2 slots to damage dealers and buffers like Yelan and Kazuha. Other electro on fielders include Cyno and Raiden. The 9 energy from Ororon's passive will be nice for Cyno, and the electro damage from the scroll set will benefit him too. Yelan will give Cyno another buff from her passive as well as hydro damage to trigger Ororon's damage from his Night Soul Blessing state. The last slot is a flex where you could go with Baizhu or Karara for Dendro application and sustainability. If you don't mind playing a bit riskier, you could throw in Xingqiu for a little sustainability and then use the last slot for extra damage from Yelan, Dendro from Nahida or grouping from Kazuha. As mentioned, Raiden's an option if you wanted to try her in electro-charged teams, especially if you have heavy investment into her with Constellations. I just think Clarande will be the best electro on-fielder. For hydro on-fielders, you could go with Neuvillette, surprise surprise. You could swap Farina out, maybe put Farina back in and swap Kazuha out. If you have Neuvillette's C1, there's also the option to swap out your sustain unit and use all 3 of Ororon, Farina and Kazuha. Ayato taser teams will be strong too, maybe opting for Ayato, Ororon, Farina and Jean if you have a C2 for the extra attack speed. You could summon Child from the Primordial Sea and run them together. People used to run Child Fireworks, which was Child, Fischl, Beidou and Bennett. Ororon would simply slot in for one of Fischl or Beidou. Ororon's also viable as the flex in the Candice Plunge team. Farina and Xianyun take the other slots. 4-piece scroll is going to make Candice, Farina and Ororon deal more damage. Not bad, not bad. There are also some Anemo on-field options. Chaska being another 5.2 unit pairs well with him. The other 2 slots would likely be Farina and Bennett. You could go for the old school Sucrose Taser team of Xingqiu, Fischl and Beidou but swap out one of the electro options for Ororon. You could also take Mr. Shitpants himself off the bench and give Hazo a run out. You could even swap out the other electro option for Yelan if you wanted to. If you're struggling for sustainability, just go with 1 hydro unit and run Bennett. If you wanted to play on fielders of other elements, you could run an Arlecchino overloaded team with Chevrus and another electro unit like Fischl. You won't be getting full access to Ororon's kit though because his passive is only triggered by electro-charged or Night Soul aligned attacks. He's a scroll holder here. Once Mawika or another Natlan Electro units come out, he'll be able to trigger the damage from his passive in this team. Alhaitham's an option too. Again, not optimal, but scroll's a nice benefit. You can go for other Dendro and Electro options like either of Nahida, Fischl, Yai and Beidou taking up the other slot. For sustainability, Nahida can hold Prototype Amber, or if you want more comfort, you could get Karara or Baizhu in there. You could even use one of Farina, Yelan or Xingqiu to trigger the damage from Ororon's passive. If you really wanted to start cooking, you could try him with Kaniche in a Quicken team. Kaniche being a Natlan unit triggers the damage from Ororon's passive. Nahida can hold Deepwood and then you have options for the last slot. You could go with another electro damage dealer and give Nahida Prototype Amber for healing, or you could go with a sustain unit like Karara or Baizhu. You could even give Cookie 4-piece Tenacity, and if you have some 5-star swords, Ki will give the team Elemental Mastery, Shalonin's weapon gives the team Elemental Damage, and Freedom Swan gives the team Attack. Overall, Ororon's a decent character. Off-field damage, holds 4-piece scroll, brings some lesser used characters back into the mix. The duration and range of his burst could be better though. I'm looking forward to seeing which units drop in the future to synergize with him because, despite popular belief, he's not just an electro-charged support. Electro-charged attacks trigger the damage from his passive, but so do Night Soul aligned attacks, so we just need more Natlan characters. Hopefully he synergizes with his granny. I just dropped a similar video for Chaska and I'm gonna drop a guide on units being buffed in 5.2. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested in them and take it easy.